Just wanted to run these photos up from Fred Cronwet. These came in last week. Some really nice Spitfire photos. And thanks to Fred for all his help in the past, of course. One of the details we modeled on all the Spitfires, the walkway forward. This plane apparently resides in California. Some really nice detail shots here of another Spit too. Anyway, the Spitfire project, we're sitting at our dinner table and thinking about our Spitfire bedroom. We're right about finished with the Spitfire bedroom. It won't be long before we're finished with it. And the Miss Ashley project moves on. Anyway, looking back at the Spitfire project, and one thing worth mentioning is just how much fun we had and how good of a friendship Joe Adamusco and I had over the course of building those, actually 5 models that we built between us. It was probably one of the most exciting times in my life, and a lot of the modeling techniques we developed we're actually using on this project. Each one becomes a building block for something that you do in the future. And even if the carbon fuselage doesn't work out exactly how we want, I keep thinking at least we're learning and we're trying to push that envelope forward every time I come down to the shop. Speaking of the shop, let's get down to the shop. Now this is from a person who decided to remain nameless. I wouldn't put his name on it. They making fun of the Brodax Silver Dope mixing system here. I don't know if this... John, if you're offended by this, hey, bite the bullet. Anyway. This is from Ken Claps, and he sent me this curve for doing the inside formers and other things that we're going to be doing on this plug molding job. I've seen these in a store. I've never purchased one, but obviously this is a good one. And some of these real pro erasers. I guess he thinks I make mistakes. I don't know, Ken. Anyway, and some 1500 and obvious some little sanding supplies. When we get into the actual finish, we'll be giving them a shot. Now, I figured there was one thing I'd put on a video, because it happens to me all the time, is I try to rush putting on the layers of PVA. And what I did, I put a couple of these on yesterday, and I tried to get a little extra. It's like putting clear dope on it, and I wound up getting a run. So I figured I hadn't put this on the video yet. When you get a run in PVA, if you leave it in, it comes out in the final part. So what I did, pretty simple. Just take some warm water, wipe it off, re-wax the mold, and this is the first coat now. I basically have to, just like when you get a run in paint, start from scratch, start from zero. But we don't want to have any runs in that first coat of PVA for sure. Vacuum pump, I haven't made up the vacuum bag yet. It won't really be important to get this in the mold. I got the, well, still not sure. Now I only have enough of this carbon material. I've ordered 10 more yards. It's $97 a yard. I've ordered more material, but I don't know how it's going to lay in a mold yet. So what I'm going to do is lay up the small part first, and I have some carbon reinforcement here to make like the equivalent of ribs. Again, since I haven't laid this up, the PVA's been drying on this overnight yet. That should be fine. What I'm really hoping is going to happen here is I'm going to be able to make a test piece today, get it into the vacuum bag, which this is the first time we're using this pump, so it may be, we've set the pump to its maximum of 24 pounds. And we need to do what amounts to be a test for no other reason, just to see how the vacuum pump works. Now, I put these little reinforcements on the side because I was anticipating having to slide this into the vacuum bag. One of the things I originally thought I was going to just make a piece up with e-glass just to see what it... we just don't have the time for that. I mean, with the Christmas holidays here and some other family things that we need to do. I want to get a part made right away, and what this will do is it needs to sit in the vacuum pump with this resin system 48 hours. So best I can get it laid up in there as soon as possible, mix up the resin and get this ready to go. Now while it's sitting in a vacuum bag 2 days, what I'll be able to do is make up the rest of the plug for the top part of the fuselage and do the rest of the work on it, kind of get it shaped and sanded and whatever, get that kind of prepared. So I'm trying to lay out a timetable. We already have the block there ready. That can come out of the mummy wrap anytime now. So we're trying to set up a schedule where everything would be relatively efficient here. And this is where it really gets to be like leapfrog, because you always need to have something in the mold, something in the oven, something up there post-curing. It just gets to be a little bit difficult doing the timing of it. But today, this will be the first time we're using this material. We're going to use the 125 resin with the 237 hardener and try to lay up what'll be what I hope the test piece and a serviceable piece for making up the other half of the plug of the fuselage. Anyway, I thought of how one of the choices I have is to lay a little bit of where this little reinforcing rib is going to be. And this is the little carbon reinforcements that we were using to make props. So we'll see if we can use a little piece of this up here. But there's a step in a mold, and I'd like to just smooth out that step just a little bit. And that'll just act as a little reinforcement. I'll try to get a little piece in the back too. Primary things we want to find out from this test is, are we going to need 2 layers of this? This is really 2.9 ounce carbon cloth. We've cut it on a bias. It lays in a mold a little bit easier that way. See if you can see the bias cut on that. And I'm trying to get the second layer on, and then I want to trim as much of this around all the extra off, because obviously you don't want to, at $97 a yard, you don't want to throw anything away here. Okay, the first piece is ready to put in the vacuum bag. I have a feeling when we put this in a vacuum bag that's going to get crushed, but I guess we're going to find out. Wet out this piece, I'm going to lay in some tow, the stuff we make the landing gear with, right in this radius. Try to fill in around some of these edges, and then I'm going to see if I'm going to need a joint or a slip joint or what down in that valley. I don't know if this material is relatively rigid, so it doesn't want to conform to that shape. Again, we're not going to know until I start laying this up. And luckily, this material, by the way, I never throw any scraps away. By the way, this material has a pot life of about 3 hours or something, so you really get to play with it. It's good for me because I need that time to make sure I get the material in all the corners and all the cuts and angles and everything. It should give us a little reinforcement up in the front. The same kind of reinforcement in the back. Now, of course, the thrill is to try to lay the cloth in. Now, this is the hard part, is getting it down into this valley. Stuff all looks so easy when you look at people that do this for a living. Of course, they've already developed the hand-eye skills and things that a hobbyist needs to develop kind of on the fly. I'm going to lay this in. Again, every part of this project is based on the idea that maybe all of these things won't work out. Maybe 90% of them won't, but if I find one thing out of this whole project that works out, I'm ahead of somebody who hasn't found anything out. Like the space shuttle program, that's how they invented crazy glue. Or whatever, something like that. Again, I know from experience this is going to be a problem, is getting this to lay down in here. And I've kind of gotten myself ready for the fact that this piece right here, right in here, is where this is going to be difficult, especially when I get the second layer in here. It's really not going to want to conform to that shape at all. And again, if this were e-glass, I'd just run off a part and say, hey, the heck with it. But for 97 bucks, I rolled out the vacuum bag. If you've never seen how they seal the ends of the bags up, it's kind of like this is a standard glider technology thing. I also need to put a fitting in the bag. This, you put a 3/8 hole. I'm reading the directions as I go along. This, of course, is where the vacuum pump gets put in. And they tell you to take 2 big pieces of balsa wood so you can slide this in. Now, I've got 2 layers in here. I've got it kind of laid down. But you also have to put in a material called bleeder cloth or peel ply, something that's going to allow the extra resin, when this gets squeezed, the extra resin comes up through, and then you peel it off. Well, in theory anyway. For our first piece, I'm not expecting any miracles, that's for sure, but we're certainly going to give this a shot today. We're committed now, and we got to go ahead with it. Now, I was not able to get in one piece like I had envisioned. Again, I got to kind of think about this. So I'm going to do this in strips, because what happens when I put one big piece here, it pulls the carbon back down into the mold. Well, we'll see how this works with doing it in strips. See, this is actually made, this system's made for doing wings, and obviously we may get to do wings before the year's out, but for right now we need to be able to capture that piece in there. Now I have the blocks of wood, just holding the bag open. I'm going to try to slide that in. Now, you know, the funny part about this is, not funny. Let's see if this works. Because it's the first time you do this, of course the second and third time it'll probably still be difficult, but it won't be as difficult. And I'm trying to put this on the floor at this point in time, because I don't have enough shelf space. I want to keep that from peeling it back if possible. It gets complicated. This is why making a fuselage is difficult. When you do wings, this is done. Now the whole idea here is that I can pull I'll get the other piece and pull the 2x4s, the balsa pieces out. And then this, when that goes into, starts to vacuum, it'll shrink around the whole piece and squeeze out the resin and push it into that bleeder cloth, any extra resin. That's where you get the value of vacuum bagging. Here, I've got the end of the bag sealed, and we're pulling out the air right now. And what I'm trying to do is make sure this doesn't pull up my... Yes, if we were doing wings, this would be no problemo. Here, I'd like to get this, because it's eventually going to pull virtually all the air out. And this will be actually, for our own records, this is going to be our first vacuum bag, legitimate vacuum bag part. Vacuum bagging puts a real tremendous force. Once it's, I have no vacuum now. It's building up vacuum. It takes a while because it's a small pump. And this is going to, in essence, when it's working the way it should, and assuming we're going to get it to work, it's going to squeeze out all of the extra resin out of this part. So you can hear noise. What it's doing, it's breaking those wooden parts of the mold. There's a tremendous force going on here. This is really a tremendous force. I just have to make sure it's not pulling in all my, for our first part, I'm sure I'm going to learn some lessons out of this. One of them is I got to take those wooden things off. I can see that, they're just breaking away. Well, that's how you learn. You can't imagine how much force. This is just a tremendous. And it's taken about 5 minutes to pull in all that material. Let's see how much pressure we have now. We're going to ultimately wind up at 24 pounds about 5 minutes from now. And let's see if it breaks the mold. Now with the pump off, you can even hear. Now I see a couple of mistakes I made already. You see the stuff on the bottom, it's broken away, all those little pieces that hold the mold up. I'll have to come up with something better than that, needless to say. But it looks like I've got, hey, and by the way, you can see it's already bleeding. That's what I call it, bleeder, because it's pulling out all the extra resin. This is all resin that would be going along for the ride if you didn't vacuum bag. I just hope it hasn't pulled. It does not look like it's pulled the cloth in. Boy, there's some tremendous force going on there, though. God. It's hard to believe. And somebody, I don't remember, George Spar or somebody told me what the calculation is, that when you can pull, and we're pulling 24 pounds right now, over that many square inches, it's like a couple of thousand pounds of force pushing that resin out. But anyway, we're going to learn from this. I see I've broken them all. Broken all this. I didn't even give that a thought. I see it's because this is my first time. And I don't believe in, like, making up a video that just shows all the everything working perfectly. You don't learn anything. This is the way you learn. This is the way I learn. Unless you do this for a living, this is the way you're all going to learn. But hey, here's what looks like it may be a problem. There may be some sharp edges, and it's going to bite through the bag eventually at this pressure. I'm going to call Midgley and find out if he thinks this might be a problem. I think I have enough material for one more bag if this bag rips. Move this up to the workbench because I want to put some heat lamps on it. And I want to be able to get a closer look as this is going. You can see it's really pulling resin out. That's all soaking it right up in there. Even up here where there's extra pieces. And obviously we have some kind of a little leak in the bag. The pump goes on about every 5 minutes or so. Listen to that noise. The real heat lamp going here, and I can monitor the temperature real. Ooh, that's nice and warm. I'm sure I'm going to wind up putting a hole in this bag. Boy, there is pressure in that. Jeez. Boy, the first time you do this, you really are. I'm really impressed. The power that this has. I've heard about this. And I can see why when they do foam wings, they have to cut the pressure down to about 7 pounds. You could just take a foam wing and just crush it. You can see all the resin is bleeding through. Now I can see on the next part, I'll lay in an extra piece of bleeder cloth right in here. And another piece up there, wherever it's puddling up the resin. And obviously the next thing is when we pull this part out, let's hope we have something like a real part. I can use this part. I'm going to start working on putting that other, the plug together, but by having this piece I can use to carve the plug in so that this piece and the plug will be a perfect match. This is already a good match to the wooden fuselage. Anyway, very, very interesting day, and Dave Midgley has been a big help with all of his ideas in this area. He provided the pump. First step in putting this plug, and we're going to let that sit in there for 2 days. We're going to basically take these fuselage sides that have balsa doublers to make up the distance. Only on this, I don't need to go through all that carving. I can narrow this down on my belt sander, get that curve in there, and kind of just do a mirror image. The whole objective is to make an exact mirror image, especially the top and bottom thicknesses of this part. I need these parts so that when I take the cowling off one, it fits on the other. And believe it or not, that is a very difficult thing to do. Anybody that's ever had a cowling and you try to make it match another, oh man, you got a little more difficult than it looks anyway. So the first thing is to get this curve up in the front here. Just save a lot of sanding in the final part. Getting that curve in there. The whole thing here is to try to, from the top view, look down. I don't want to take more than I need to off, but it looks like we've got a pretty close mirror image. And I also want to make sure the sides are no thicker or thinner, and that I can look down through all the motor mount bolts at the same time. So I don't have the motor further forward or back or more offset or less. I can see through all of the motor bolt holes at the same time. And since this is not going to be, in essence, a real fuselage, we can give up or we don't really have to concern ourselves with a lot of the structure. We're just going to use CA to tack this in place. Now I'm just going to get one side on here. Wait till that kicks off. Pinch the front. Doesn't even matter if it cracks or not at this point in time. And then I need to make sure my other side is, it's the same as making the fuselage. I'm not going to go through this step by step, but I'm just going to make up what amounts to be a dummy fuselage here. The thing, of course, is to make sure that one side isn't in front of the other. And I have a little reference line inside where my 90 degrees is, because we're not going to cut the holes for the wing at this time. In fact, we may not cut it into the final model even, so that then you'd be able to replace. Let's say you want to use an SV11 wing. Well, as long as we have a center line and a forward line, that should be all we need. Now, the way I'm going to try to get the top of the fuselage equal, in fact, I don't even need to do from that point forward. The crutch will keep that. Is I'm going to basically make a former the whole length of the fuselage here. And now I'm going to have to undersize it by the thickness of the fuselage sides. Now this part, in essence, should be a mirror image of the other fuselage. I can cut this out and tack it in place. Of course, I need to make it thinner by the thickness of the fuselage. So I can use some tape. This will represent the fuselage side, and then I can trim right along the inside of that tape. And I should have an inner former that's exactly the same as the former, as the outline that I've traced off the original part. Now I'll have to dress this edge off because I can see I'm using up old wood and it's got a grain, a real crazy grain in it. Screw this up so I get, and I'll leave the dust on. Again, this is just going to get CA'd in place. When you're making a fuselage it's not gonna need any structural integrity, well, it goes pretty quick. It's when you have to get every joint just perfect that it's I don't know, just time consuming, I guess. Okay, now I need to know that this is going to fit. I think you can pretty much figure out what my motive is, and I'll sand it until it fits. Oh, I have to take into account, see, I forgot another step. I didn't take into account the doublers. Okay, so the doublers go back to here. I need to pull off a 1/16. I'm going to do the same thing now as undersize this by a 1/16 to account for the doublers on the carbon fiber. Probably saying, he already made this part, why is he making it again? Well, I trimmed it too thin, and when I put the two fuselages together, the one with this piece in it was a little too thin. So I'm just going to take another piece of wood and make another one, because again, this is only going to be a plug. But if it's wrong, we don't know that maybe you'd be using this for the rest of my life. It'll turn out to be some really fantastic model. And if it isn't, we're going to learn from it. Going to school is expensive. You go to Harvard, you got to pay to learn to be a lawyer or something. Well, this is the equivalent of Harvard. Anyway, and I'm never opposed to just making up a new part. Now, one of the things that you would think would be real easy, but it isn't, is getting two of these parts exactly alike. Well, when you lay one on top of the other, I don't even want to have a difference of, you know, the slightest amount. So what I did is I took this top piece and made a mirror image that I'll use as the bottom. And that'll ensure that the fuselage is square. It isn't angled off on one side or the other. And I'll have to split it because the back of the fuselage goes up. But for right now, it looks like we got this pretty close. Now another trick that I've found real useful, once you have the body lined up, if you're going to use this method here like a crutch, is just get everything taped together and then tack it every so often, well, maybe every 2 inches or whatever. You don't need to be too cute about it either. So right now we just want to have it all square, all even, and all exactly the same as the other part. And I really can't finish this or do any of the work on it until I have the the part that's going to come out of the mold in a couple of days, because I want that part to, in essence, be the pattern to carve this part. And if I just get this even and just tack this between the tape, then as I take the tape out, I can tack it there. And once I know it's nice and straight and perfectly even, I'll glue this on the inside seam. Now that's all we're going to get done today, but I would count that as like we're at least well on the way to having this part. And I need the other piece out of the mold before I can carve the bottom. And tomorrow I'll come in and glue the bottom in, get some formers in, get the wing and tail positions marked. And the idea here is to get them exactly the same thickness, width, height. Talk about screw-ups, I can tell you already I've got a problem here. See, by having these two, first off, the first thing I should have never done is put two pieces in the same bag. I should have made two separate bags or two separate runs. Getting ahead of myself, and it warped the mold. See, from this piece being squeezed, you can imagine a tremendous power to squeeze. This is like 1/4-inch fiberglass. But the trick here is I've got to get a smaller bulb or move the bulb further away. Again, this is the learning curve. First one, and I may be able to salvage it, but if I can't, I'll remake that part of the mold. Even though this is carbon fiber, a lot of times you might be able to warm it up and just move it, well, like a prop. Anyway, more later, more tomorrow. It's going to sit another day in here. It looks for sure this has been sitting here for so long. I have a feeling I've ruined the mold by making this mistake. And the mistake was to put, really, in essence, the two molds in the same bag. Obviously, there's people out there laughing, but the reason for putting this on the tape is so that, you know, that you don't do it. Anyway, what I'm going to do is release the pressure here and see if I can heat this mold. Oh, we got to shut the pump. Somehow rebag this, and again, I don't know if that's a possible, a practical, or a don't even think about it. Since the resin usually takes 48 hours to really cure, it may be that I can somehow heat this, put it back in the bag. Again, a mistake not to make. Never put two in the bag at the same time. But now the worst that can possibly happen here is that I have the original plug, and I'll go out and I'll make a whole nother mold off camera. I'm hoping I'm not going to have to do that, and I'm hoping that part of the thing that'll happen here is I'll be able to salvage some of this. Again, we'll find out. Now, you know you can reconfigure carbon props. I guess we're going to find out if we can do the same thing with this. And I think the problem I had was I had too much heat. I'm going to have to stay away from that much heat until the resin cures. Again, at this point, I really don't have anything to lose, so I'm going to try to flatten this back down. Same thing, the other part is even twisted worse than this one. But if I find out I can do this, then I've added to my knowledge. If I find out, and it's my own fault, I didn't think about it, but actually should have the parts totally separate in the bag or a separate bag for each part. Well, now that I know that, of course, hey. And again, the worst that can happen with any of these jobs, I'll make the mold over. But maybe by seeing some of these problems on the tape, if you decide to do anything like this, you'll avoid that pitfall anyway. It really took a dent in there, boy. Wow. Again, we're going to find out if oh yeah, that gets soft. Yeah, in fact, it gets so soft you could bend it around corners. Wow. Maybe we can fix this. Why am I giving up? I never give up. Yeah, it's going to be a tough thing to fix because that piece went right in there and put a dent in it. Ooh, that is strong. Once the resin cools to where you can touch it, it's so strong it's unbelievable. See, it's really, in essence, should stay in a vacuum bag for 48 hours, too. So this has only been in there one day. The resin really hasn't assumed any level of hardness, which may be working in my advantage right now. Oh, we've got some of it out. Can't be any harder than fixing Strega, that's for sure. Oh! As he burns himself on camera. Well, we'll see if we got any of that twist out. Now, I found the easiest way to... not the easiest way. The easiest way is just don't do dumb stuff like this. Anyway, this heat lamp really heats the mold a lot faster than a hairdryer. And I'm trying to, just like pitching a prop, I'm going little by little till it sits on a flat table. And I don't know, you know, I'm already planning on making a mold over, but this is how you learn. Unfortunately, it's like slamming your hand in a car door. You do something like this and you really tend not to do it over and over again. Almost straight. I have about 90% of this out of it already. And if this doesn't work, I'm going to have to go put this out in our little autoclave type of oven outside. I've come to totally respect the power of a vacuum bagging machine and respect the power of epoxy. Wow. The nice thing about epoxy, you heat it up and you can move it. I keep laying it on this flat surface of the table. Looks like I've got, well, I'm not sure. But I think together we've all learned. Now this piece had a twist in it, a 30-degree twist. It's only got a very slight twist now. And I can keep working. Actually, I can keep working this. It's still warm. But it's probably going to be, well, you don't know. It's probably going to be one of the things I just make the mold over. I'm just going to let that cool, but I'll look at that tomorrow. It should stay in a mold. Actually, without being in a vacuum bag, I don't have enough to re-vacuum bag it. I had to cut the bag apart to get it out of there. Now, believe it or not, I found the best way to straighten this mold out, at least get it more flexible. I put my little autoclave on, my autoclave oven. 2 bulbs gives me 150 degrees when the door is shut. I've got the mold in there and it's pre-warmed. Whoa. More. I'm just waiting for it to cool and I can touch it. And I can give it another little twist. Yeah, now I'm not sure I'm going to be able to salvage this. In fact, I'm not real optimistic at all. But I want to, you know, if you want to be like a real technician, you got to know how to get out of these jams. And I'm real good at getting into the jams, so actually it looks like I might have salvaged at least this piece. I'm not sure. But as this cools, now I can touch it now. Well, we've sure got 90% of it out of there. And that other little piece, wow! Whoa! See, tooling resin is certainly not high temperature resin. I don't know, it looks like we may, we'll find out tomorrow. Have some of the gear in here in our little oven doing the post-cure routine. And I made up, just to see if it would be of any value, some wheel pan halves with the what I'll call the high strength resin, to see if I can make them any lighter. Again, it's hard to do this kind of work if you don't have some kind of a little oven. Now, time will tell whether we can salvage that mold, but in the meantime, last time I worked on this, I made up this piece for the bottom. I'm going to put a couple of formers in here. I just want to make sure I have this. I'm going to try to feel how many formers I need in here. Yeah, I'm going to need normal formers. It's going to be too weak without them. Now I'll just fill this with formers at with a 90-degree angle, making sure what the 90 degree will do is help to keep from building in a twist. The trick here is to make sure none of the formers, since they're not structural formers, that they're not other than exactly 90 degrees. And that should give us a relatively good shot at getting a fuselage that's nice and straight. And we'll just go right down the fuselage one by one and lay these in. It's always easier, and I've been mirror imaging this to make sure I'm not making this wider or thinner, to put in exactly half of the formers, and I've laid out where each one of the next ones will go. I'll obviously just drop them in. As long as they're all 90 degrees, we don't care what this part weighs when we're done. And then we're going to have to trim off each one of these flush. That's pretty much going to be the frame or the bulk part of what will be our plug. And then we're going to have to, obviously, maybe tomorrow, fit up the top block, the nose ring, and do the final shaping. But with this part in the bank, I feel like we made some progress. Believe it or not, one of the hardest things on this project is, I don't even know if I'm using the right word, but I'm calling it sequencing, is trying to get things in sequence. And I'm trying to figure this out. I want to trim all the formers off with the top. I have all the formers in a fuse now, and then make sure I've got an exact, always lay a razor blade or something like that on top, an exact mirror image that I can put these back to back. Boy, I'm hoping and praying tomorrow that mold will be salvageable. Save me a lot of time, save me a lot of money. Anyway, what I want to do after trimming all those formers, I want to create a perfectly flat edge. This obviously will be the bottom of the mold. And the back is going to have an up sweep in it. Let me see if we have the cowl angle right. Yes, we're going to have to marry, if we can salvage that piece, we're going to have to marry that whole bottom piece to this piece. And I want to see that these are pretty accurate. It looks like a big alligator. Anyway, we got that part that from the top, and it's the top view that we really care about. We have that pretty well under control here now. Yeah, this worked out pretty well. The next thing is to just set the motor in, bolt it in, and make up a nose, actually about a half a nose ring will do here, and get that set in place, pretty much similar to when we built the real fuselage. Now before I actually put the motor in and start on the nose, I want to re-verify, this is just for my own, I want to really press these lines in. I'm going over a line that's already there. Make sure I have exactly an accurate center line. That's really gouged in, and that I hope will come out in the final part, even after I mold it. Now, not only do I need it to be centered from top to bottom, I also don't want one wing to be in front of or behind. So the way I have found in the past works well on this is trace up from the trailing edge, and we'll just put a little from that trailing edge. Again, these will probably come out in the final mold. And we want to do this one. This one kind of faded from ammonia or whatever we got on it. And I can see this one needs to go back just a little bit, even though this is, what I need to do is establish a 90 degree here. Do this is just verify with a machinist ruler. We'll draw a center line down the whole fuselage. Oh, Nixon. And I can get a center line going here, and then just laying out a 48-inch ruler, trace out, trace out the whole center line on the whole fuselage. Then I can reference my 90 degrees off. Can't believe it. Now I thought I was going to need this piece on the bottom too, but these formers, because I put so many formers in, really I don't even think I'm going to need that piece. Anyway, anytime I can eliminate one of the parts, of course, I can put more time into actually finishing the mold. Now this will just be a reference line. I have a 90-degree reference. I can reference from the hinge line up, and now I need to, and I'll obviously adjust the side that's not correct. Just get this right in. And what this will do is I won't have the hole for one wing forward or behind the other one. We're using the top of the fuselage as a parallel line. What I did, I put a piece of tape on here with a little dot. This makes my poor eyesight a little bit better. And I want to see when I slide this down that I've got a parallel line, obviously on both sides. I don't want to see that line either getting bigger or smaller. I have the front to back figured out relative to the 90-degree center. Now I want to get the template, and I want to lay the top half. I only need to deal with the top half right now, but I'll put in both sides, and I'm really going to gouge it. I don't know if you can see how close. I've really got a press line in there because I'd like that to come out in the final mold, that I can use it for a reference line. I can really press down on that line. And these are the plywood templates that I have made. Just cross-check that our actual ribs fit. And the next step is to get the nose ring in here. And we only need it really half of it, so I didn't even make a full circle. Get it lined up with the back plate. Pretty much the same as when we put the, not a whole lot different, except it's not a whole nose ring. Once you take the shims out, in essence, you should have exactly, assuming you put the same shim around the whole thing, a very rough, in fact. Once we can take this off now, we don't even need the nose ring. And that nose ring should be seated in position. That's a nice way, and we've done that on the other tape too, a nice way to set the nose ring. Now the next thing is, I'm going to get a Zona saw, trim this off, because when we put that glass piece on here, that carbon piece, that should rest right up there, and that'll have the impression of the other half of the nose ring in it. And this is the part here I need to saw off very carefully. Just leave a little oversized, and then I'll dress that off with that little belt, sanding belt that I have glued to the table. I'm trying to follow that angle as best I can. And I'll just need to dress that off. Okay, now the next little bit I got to dress off of here. And I'm going to try to put all the pressure on the nose ring here, very little on the fuselage. Again, that whole bottom piece, I need the molded piece to get this final fits in here. There's no point going any further than that. Bottom, I think we already have dressed off. You know, that has to match up to the other fuselage pretty accurately, but we won't know until I have this piece. I can't go any further on this till I have the piece. And I may have to make that new mold, I don't know yet. Anyway, it looks like we're not going to need that bottom reinforcement. I'm ready to just get that shell out of the mold. Maybe I can get that shell tacked on tonight. I'm just trying to make sure again that every dimension, every step of the way is a mirror image. I don't want to have two separate sizes or have to make, you know, obviously if we weren't making a wooden fuselage plane, if we were only making one, well, that'd eliminate 3/4 of the work. But we want to have the backup system that if the carbon for some reason, again, it's like all experimental stuff. If this doesn't work, we can go right back to having an all-wood fuselage. Call me a coward. You can call me a genius. I don't know. Had this shell sitting up here. We have left the bandage on right to the very last second. Unless we want to pull the bandage off now, expose that, trim it, and get it right on in one piece. I know this is just one thing in the whole world of modeling. One of the things I enjoy the most is pulling off one of these molded shells. Now in essence, this shell, even though we have one that's already fine-tuned into the first fuselage, they should be, if not exactly alike, they should be, you know, within a very short amount close to each other. Anyway, I just think every time I do this, I think, oh my God, imagine if I had to carve another block and another block. I don't know, it gets to a point, I think you only have so many blocks in your life that you can carve and hollow, and then you just get, I don't know, get bummed out by it. But these, I call them the mummies. Every time I pull one of these mummies off, and we'll get this one prepped up. I got a little bit of time tonight here before the wife calls me for supper. Is that a thing of beauty or what? Just think, all that carving, oh God. We'll just ink the line on this, and in a matter of 10-15 minutes we'll have it trimmed up. Do a little sanding on the mold. We've already done this on camera enough times, but boy, if you've never done one of these, what a pleasure. And little by little we're sneaking up on having all the molds for Miss Ashley here. I always trim this just a little bit oversized. We're going to have to carve a little piece for the back of the tail, because this is not the full length, of course. But it won't matter for the plug. Yeah, you can laugh at molding all you want. Every time you make a shell, you can think, wow. I think, anyway. Boy, I can remember carving cardinal top blocks. I bet I've carved about 50 cardinal top blocks. And every one I say, oh God, I just wish I could like reach into a bag and take one out. Anyway, these trim right up. We've already done this one, and I'm just so happy about it. Now I want to do most of the sanding. There's a lot of marks from the bandage in this wood. But it's no problem, because I'll just put this back up on the shell once I get this at least neatly trimmed. Now it's real handy here if you have a couple of friends over and they can all put the pressure equally. Yeah, that makes it a little bit neater. Tricks is never sand it in midair if you can sand it right on the shell it was molded on. This gets out all the little lines, all the little dimples and things from the ace bandage. You can see up here what some of these little things come in. As soon as you touch it with sandpaper, they're gone. And we don't need to try to make this shell real thin. In fact, if anything, we could have just left a carved block in place. It wouldn't even matter on this, since it's going to be a plug. And then I need to go over to the fuse, and maybe that's all I'll get to do tonight, is just get this tacked in place. And I got to cut up a little block for the back, because I really can't go any further on this until I get that molded bottom piece, and I still don't know if I'm going to have to redo that mold. Reinforced the front and added some material just so I have some material to sand into, just the same way as we did on the shell that's going to be on the wooden fuselage. Now with those reinforcing ribs in there, that really is a real easy way to get this to. In fact, I can see we're only going to get the very ends of the motor mounts here when we actually get to sand this in. Anyway, this is ready. I need to do a little trimming and fitting on this, and then of course sand this area out to see that we're getting some symmetry. It's a real close fit on the other fuselage, so that'll definitely give me the indication that I'm making a you know, relatively similar piece. A helper around, which is always the case. I like to use a little piece of tape, tack glue it down about every inch or so. That's all I'm going to get to do tonight. Still Christmas season and we still have family obligations. We'll come back and work on this tomorrow. I had to put this little block by the tail. Maybe tomorrow I can get it, see what that little piece on the bottom is going to look like, and then get a couple of days of sanding and filling and finishing and turning this into a plug. The next step is going to be to blend this nose section in on the plug and take care of carving out this little tail piece, and then putting a final finish on the whole plug at one time. Now, preparing this plug, later on today I'm going to go out there and see how the mold is coming out. I can get the top like semi-final finish, but I really can't do the bottom until I get a usable part. We still need to see if that mold is going to be, well, we're crossing our fingers. It's been sitting out there for a couple days. But that's the worst that can happen here is we're going to be making a new mold, and I guess in our lifetime it's not the worst thing in the world. And in case, if you're new to the videos, you know I've got drawers and drawers of molds that didn't work out. Anyway, we're going to finish this up. This is one of our next. Get this blended in. And as always, we can finish it up with our little plane. We're waiting to get that Hobby Lobby plane. Can't wait to see how that is going to work. Always the best that I like to check with my hand, not my eye, when I'm doing a final little carving down. Always use your, I think it's better to always use your hand anyway. Now once we get the nose, I've just used the little blocks to fill in all these little parts. We're going to, same thing up here, we're going to take some of this off, and you can see how much of that motor mount is sticking out. We can basically just take some of this extra wood off and then go over to the sanding bench. When you don't have to deal with the hardwood, hey, it makes it a lot easier. Putting that little curve in a crutch, always a good idea if you know ahead of time what the curve will be, what spinner you're going to use. Alright, time to go to the sanding bench. The tools can be a big help up by the nose here. this area up here is a hard, soft, hard, soft, hard, soft. When I get it at least half sanded, all these little blocks have been sanded in. When I get basically the shape I want, what I want to do, just get a nice, relatively close to what I want shape. Then I'm going to saturate this whole area with thick CA, sand it again, soak it again, sand it, so that this all becomes kind of a hardened material. And any kind of good sanding block will put the final. I want to make sure I keep this is important too, to keep this surface flat. So when I get that other part, I have a mating surface. Now the problem is, anytime it's a hard surface and a soft surface, you're always gonna have little mountains, and by doing it with my hands, I can feel there's a high spot here, a soft spot, hard spot. So wherever I know there's a hard spot, I can do a little extra dressing off this way, because I know that the CA will harden the wood up around it and make the blend a lot nicer. And because this is a plug, we could actually use Bondo, DAP, any kind of filler, but I just like doing it this way. It gives me the best feel for getting the shape I want. And what I might in essence be doing is sanding every fuselage, well, and it is what every fuselage that's ever going to come out of this plug. And I'm trying to keep this plug generic. I'm not going to have a canopy on it or anything. So if somebody wants to make a custom Miss Ashley with the canopy up here like a jet, or like with the top from somebody else's design, make it look like their own, hey, we know that's, I mean, it's not like this is a bad thing to do. Everybody wants to have some kind of customized plane, and you'd never even know then that it was taken from this design. But I think all of the stunt ships, all of the modern ships anyway, seem to have pretty similar everything, really. Okay, we want to get some fixed CA on this now. Best tricks I've ever seen in the whole world of model aviation is the old seal it all with thick CA. A paper towel now, because it doesn't kick off quickly. You got time to kind of look at it, but you want to get it, and you want to keep the towel moving. And what this allows you to do now is, we're going to do this back and forth 4 or 5 times. It allows you to build up that everything on the nose now, when this kicks off by itself, will be relatively hard. And we'll go sand it, come back, do this whole operation maybe 5-6 times, and we should have a nice blend up there. Never use kicker, just let it kick off by itself with the dust and the towel. Now after about 4 times, you wind up seeing, see, there's a little low spot there, and you have a choice of filling that with CA, or you can just sand around it. Basically now you can't feel where the motor mounts begin, where they end. So it's real easy to get that final blend in. When you're doing that hard to soft, oh man, especially around motor mounts. Always 1 or 2 little sanding flaws. Now what you want to do is leave a little bit of the dust on. The dust acts like a filler and a kicker at the same time. And then I want to get out the spinner and see if I have any high spots I need to work on. And we still got a couple little spots, but at least we've got the blend right. You can see what a nice surface that leaves, but of course I want to get rid of that surface. All I want to use it for is that it's made it hard. And we may only need 1 or 2 more of these, but you eventually build up the equivalent of a little layer of material on here. And even if this is something that's worth doing anytime you have, even if this was going to be a flyable fuselage, by the time you're done sanding, there's almost no extra work, no extra weight. Another thing too, when you're grabbing a model to flip it, especially with these high compression engines, this gives it, you don't wind up putting your fingernails into it as a side benefit. Next step is I did the whole top block with thin CA, thick CA, I'm sorry. And I'm going to repeat this over and over, and I'm going to record it over and over. The 3 or 4 coats on the top, and then the last thing will be to bring it down into the fuse side. Now what I'm trying to do is establish that the top of this is just a little bit thinner. I've been trying to taper it up so that the mold, remember that thing of releasing a mold, even though this is not going to have a real draft angle, it'll have just a little bit of draft angle. And that's, I just been working this curve and trying to make this thinner, 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 and then the thickest part of it will be at the bottom. Nose blended in nice, but one of the things I always like to do, really can't do it till I go get that part out of the oven. Make sure I haven't distorted that in any way. Now what I've done, I've got this hardened all up here and then blended, of course, but I've left the last little bit because I need to put that cowling piece in here and then feather edge that in or shape it in, as the case may be. It looks like we've got enough sanding on this that now we need to get that bottom block. And I've made myself a little bit of a problem I have to work around now. Is I've tried to get this draft angle here, and I've got the shell real thin in a couple of spots. Now you might be saying, well, why didn't the dummy just use a block? Yeah, you could use a block, but then I wouldn't have the mold, and I'd have all that time invested in another block carving. Anyway, I'm going to live with the fact this is real thin and possibly cover this with glass. I don't know yet. I'm going to have to think about it. I want to see how the bottom piece is going to mate onto this. But after I'm done with the block, I like to get this kind of a motion, and this gets out all of the little, like you're making an octagon when you're using a sanding block. And we're ready. Actually, we're ready. I'm going to go out and get that piece out of our little oven. See if I can get it out of the mold. That's always a mold maker's worst nightmare, is you're done and you've lost the mold and the part at the same time. Now there is a spot here that I've sanded so thin, I've tried to put extra CA on, but what I'm going to do is just lay some extra fiberglass over that, maybe. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see how that mold, if they're going to get that piece out of the mold. Ooh. Now, we know that this is going to be a problem. We're not going to have a good finish in here because we took this out of the bag before it was done. But I just want to get some idea. The things I'll learn from this are 2 layers of this lightweight cloth going to be enough? Maybe we need 3, maybe we need 4, who knows. But in other words, a lot of layers of lightweight cloth are always going to be stronger than 1 layer of thick because you don't have those big waffle gaps where it's just epoxy. Now usually these will come out. Dropped right out. Wow. Now I can see we have 2 problems. This is where I got the mold too hot. I had it under that heat lamp and it left the impression. See, here's a spot. Now I could clean this mold up. I probably can sand this little defect out. Yeah, it's still relatively flat. Boy, I was fooling with this a lot. Now I have this piece here, which of course is the piece that has the resin on it. See, I've got little defects in here, but if they're no worse than this, it really doesn't even matter, assuming this would be a part. The reason is we're going to sand this. I want to have an 80 grit sanding finish on this to adhere to Brodak primer to. Let's see if the big one comes off. It fell right out of the mold. You didn't even have to pull on it. Now, looks like the little reinforcement up here is fine. Now the problem that we have, and I see there's bubbles all over the place. These bubbles, I can show you how these were caused, more than likely from twisting the mold. I've put air pockets in there. Yeah, it's basically from twisting it that I've made a problem for it. Anyway, this will not be a usable part, but this has given me some good information. First, if I can weigh it, I can see how much it weighs. I can tell, for instance, up here it's strong enough. Back here it seems kind of weak. I'm probably going to go with 3 layers. The little reinforcements, wow, the little reinforcements are the ticket here. I can lay them in. Again, I'm sure I screwed this up in manipulating things and taking it in and out of the bag. But it doesn't look like we've done any damage to the mold. This is just parts where the compression of the vacuum bagging and then twisting it made them appear. Alright, so I guess for a first attempt, we've learned enough. We've learned something to make it worthwhile. Another problem I've made for myself here by a combination of the heat lamp and several other factors here. The peel ply, this is supposed to only absorb just a little bit of resin. I've got way too much resin in here. And it's actually laminated to the part, so I'm just going to trim this off. I just want to get a fit for it anyway. So I can tell right away, I'm going to go back to using the blue stuff. See, I wanted to try this. This is what came with the pump. But I think for my case, the blue peel ply will be a better choice. What the deal is this is a stuff that they use on wings, and I'm still not sure how they intend this to work. I touched grinding some off with a Dremel tool because this bonds just, you know, right to the material. So obviously I've used this in an incorrect way. There's no way that would work that I could see. But anyway, we do have plenty of the blue breather cloth, and they're telling you here that you're supposed to have some. I assume what this is supposed to be is when you're doing a wing, let's say it's this way, you lay the Mylar on the wing first and then the breather cloth on top, but I can't really tell. The instructions are really based on doing wings, but so another lesson we've learned is this is not appropriate for what we're doing, but luckily we have a whole roll of the stuff Midgley sent, the blue stuff. Again, always pays to read the directions. But again, see, here's what the deal is. It's vacuum bagging for wings. Now, one thing really sad. I ground this all off with a Dremel tool, but this is obviously just going to be a test part, just for my own reference. But even though it looks like this is a terrible failure, and boy, if this was the first part you ever made, you might want to just sink the boat or something, or order up a load of balsa blocks. Now, we've learned a lot. I learned not to use this stuff, and I will never do that again. And that's the whole point. You slam your hand in a car door, you really learn instantly. Now, in this case, when you're using $97 a yard material and you throw a $50 worth of stuff away, it hurts. But hey, I won't eat for a week. That'll do me even more good. Anyway, I weighed this part. This part weighs 5.5 grams. So I'm thinking we're well within the weight, and needless to say, it's pretty tough skinned. I don't know in terms of how much strength it has relative to balsa. Again, we'll find out. And it's got these reinforcements. Now, one thing I can see right away, these little reinforcements, these are really going to be a good thing. I got to figure out how I can engineer more of those into the part. But anyway, this looks like, now what I need to be able to do, of course, and the whole reason for having this, or even using it, is just to be sure that the part is going to fit on there when we're done. Now that piece seems to fit reasonably enough. Again, I can't really tell because this back is like a banana from being crushed in a mold, but I'm going to redo that mold, of course. That'll take care of that. That looks like that part of it's going to be fine. Now I'm going to basically do the same thing to the larger part and see if I can make that work. Now I've just taped this in place just to get an idea just how close this fit would be. That looks reasonable enough. Certainly within the range that I'm assuming would be okay. And the reason I can't, this side of the mold has a bad edge, so I can't really reference off that. Pretty much though, it looks like we've got that part of it. Well, considering what a tragedy this thing has been, I guess we should quit while we're ahead here. Okay, next time we get to work on this, I'm going to just true up that area around the cowl, and we'll be ready to put a finish. Actually, I think I'm going to fiberglass the plug just to give me a little more strength while I'm making the mold. I also need to cut out the tail That last little piece is going to be a bolt on, but I need to take that out of the original mold. Put the finish on it and we'll be ready to lay this up. I guess it's not going as badly as I think it is, even though I get depressed about it. Using that bleeder cloth. Ugh. Can't believe I fell for that. This is the last little piece. Just get a feather edge on. Even though I don't have a good part here, I can see that we've got it's reasonable anyway. That's the only part I'm concerned with right now. Blast this up. I need to remove this piece, but I want to save it. This will be either a separate mold or I'll carve it from a separate block or whatever, but now that I have this all contoured in, I want to really trim this very carefully, because now when I actually lay up the piece, I can put the carbon fiber piece or plywood right in place, and using the actual glass that I'm using to make the part, the stab mount can be built right in as we make the part. That's one of the choices we'll have. I want to make sure I'm getting as close to a 90-degree cut on this as I can. Here's another beautiful pen that doesn't write. The next step, once it's dressed off, I'm going to line this whole thing with 64th plywood, because I don't want to have this not be rigid at the very end, and this will actually compromise part of the mold. And this piece, of course, I may or may not be able to make a separate mold for this, and I'll just have to attach the rudder. I'm not sure if this is an appropriate part to run a mold off, and I'll make one when it's, you know, the appropriate time, and then we always could remanufacture these, just make patterns for all the parts, but that looks like that'll work fine. Needless to say, this is only going to work one way, with the bend going one way. I can lay that right in there. The easiest way, I just tacked it in these corners. Now I can run a bead around the front. Seal this whole area in. Remember, it only bends, I can glue my finger to the part, it only bends one way, so it's kind of self-explanatory. Once that corner's dry, now I can get right inside. Now I'll make a pattern of this piece, because this will be, I'm still thinking of a way, and again this evolves, thinking of a way I can get that stab mount in place right at the time I mold the fuselage. Well, we're going to find out. '64th plywood is a really, really good material, really useful. As long as you get the grain going in the right direction, it's just super useful. Get a rough trim on here with scissors even. I just fill in this last little piece with a piece of scrap. Dress this all off. Be ready to glass this up. Alright, with that we're ready to bring in fiberglassing. Okay, step one, let's get newspaper all over the table. This tends to get a little messy. And what's good is it's really cold outside, so the heat will be on. The heat will tend to cure the epoxy. I'll hang it right by a heating vent. Just come up with some way of mounting this and holding it up off the ground. You can picture trying to fiberglass this. if you didn't have it up off the ground. After a long debate, I decided to screw a piece of wood to the bottom. I want to make some little feet for this. This is a now obviously if you have a plane, this would all change if you had a helper. But when you work alone, you know, in the deep blue sea like we do here. In fact, I'll put these on an angle. That would seem to make it a little bit better. And then I can just CA them. And this will give me a reasonably good mount. Next step will be to cut up some fiberglass cloth. We'll use 1.5 ounce cloth, and the SIG epoxy where one tube is twice the size of the other. Okay, that looks like it'll work. That'll hold it in place while I'm stretching and troweling and weaving. You always need it. And of course, if you have a helper, great. But if you don't have a helper, you still have to be able to do the job. We'll use some SIG 1.5 ounce cloth. This looks like it's going to be a good choice. And in that low spot, I'll lay a couple extra layers of cloth in there. I want to make sure the cloth will cover in one piece before I mix the resin. It should drape. By the way, this would be no different if you were covering an RC fuselage, a profile cardinal, anything you can do in one piece. Hey, we could even, if we wanted to, and we'll make a decision when we get to the wood fuselage, we may cover the whole wood fuselage the same way. Okay, that looks like it'll be fine. Ready to mix the resin. Now I can usually work on a project like this relatively quickly. So I make a choice, and the choice is I leave the temperature in the shop a little bit on the warm side. Now that lets the resin flow a lot nicer. If you need extra working time, if you're looking to, say it's the first 1 or 2 times you do a project like this, you want to trade that away, let the shop be cold. And I'm just thinking, if I had any brains, I would have glued the feet to the floor. And the first step is always get the resin on. Don't fool around. You waste a lot of time just fooling around painting resin on. I guess, well, maybe better than having it glued to the table is the fact I can just move it. See, sometimes you think you have a great invention until later on, and you come up to the idea, well, hey, it wasn't so great to begin with. Anyway, we're learning. I've got the combination of the disappointment of part of the project, but that's all part of the learning curve. If you were learning how to cook, if you were watching Essence of Emerald and you were learning how to cook Cajun food, your first, souffle wouldn't come out perfect either. But hopefully with the help of the videos, you can save, here goes the hair of the brush, you can save some of this, what seems to be needless, extra, whatever you want to call it, unnecessary kind of disappointment. Now, had I read those directions and maybe been a little smarter, figured it out, I looked at that breather cloth and I thought, well, I even talked to Midgley. Midgley never even caught it, so. Okay, I'm going to draw out the resin. Usually the SIG resin will give you about 45-minute working time. So you can just let that sit. Now the trick is you want to pull from the center to the outside, no matter what the shape is. If you were doing, let's say, an RC fuselage, this would be, just one way you would do it. Some people are a lot more comfortable with rubber gloves. On a job like this, if I possibly can, I like to do it with my fingertips and then go right over and wash my hands with lava soap. Never wash your hands with acetone or alcohol after using epoxy. Always go for lava soap. The resin brushed on. These are these great little epoxy spreaders. You can use play-in cards, you can use IBM cards. Enough things you can use, but this is generally one way, and you just save yourself a lot of sanding. You always want to start from the middle. Whatever the middle is, catch the resin that's fallen off. Save you a lot of sanding by doing it this way. Now, one trick, if you're going to use 2 layers of cloth anywhere, you want to put them both on at the same time and saturate them. You don't want there to be a gap in between. Just look already how much of that resin is coming off. I'm going to try to see if you can see up close here. See, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. Look at the texture of this as you pull the resin off. You can see it almost gets dry. And you can get almost all the resin off when you're done. And most people, the first time they do this, they're amazed. They say, well, I got all the resin off. Look at this. Have to answer the phone. This will have to be a quick one. I don't want to eat into my layup time. What to keep in mind is, the thinner you draw this epoxy out, the longer it'll take to cure. It'll give you more working time. If you leave a big glob of it somewhere, that's where it kicks off first. The thinner you make it, it's to your advantage to draw this way out, save you all that sanding. Now over this, the advantage I have on this is over this, I'll be able to put Bondo, any kind of body filler, any kind of material like that, and grind and sand right into it. Now, I'm usually able to do this relatively quickly, but I'm sneaking up on having the amount of time on this that I want to get the last little bit off. And I just go right till the material starts to gel. Just keep after it. Now, if you have a helper, hey, get him troweling too. Get everybody, get Mama troweling. And like I said, I'll put a hook in this, hang this up by the heating vent. 24 hours later, I should be able, usually if you wait 48 hours, in fact it may be that we'll let it sit an extra day. Because in essence, I really do want to get a nice finish on this. I really am trying to make this, that when the plug is done, I don't have a whole lot of work with each part dressing it off. The final little thing, put on a pair of nice rubber gloves, and I can stretch the material even more. But again, you wouldn't want to do this until you get most of the wrinkles out. In this case, there's almost no wrinkles, but anything I can do to make the sanding of the job easier, this is one way of doing it. And I'll be doing this right up, in fact I won't put it on camera, right up until the last minute before the epoxy, and it takes about between 15 and 45 minutes to go into like a jello state. One last thing, because that soft spot, I was going to put another layer of cloth in there, but it's so shallow. Now that the surface is shiny, I can see how shallow it is. I'll just fill it in with a little Bondo or polyester resin tomorrow. No sense even wasting the cloth on it. It always amazes me. You can get almost all of the epoxy off when you're done. It almost all comes off. One last little trick, tip, whatever you want to call it. Let's get all the epoxy out of the way. Take just ordinary isopropyl alcohol, soak a rag with it. A clean paper towel is good. Wring it out on the workbench so it's just damp. Not soaking wet, just damp. And I can just, now not press down because I don't want to mix the epoxy with alcohol. I'm just touching it. And we're almost ready to put this guy away. Almost ready to put me away. Let's see what the other side looks like. The little stand seems to have worked out okay. Now some people I've heard mix the alcohol right in with the epoxy. When I tried that, I did not have real good results. I'm not sure if I put too much in or whatever. And I think that's ready. That's ready to put away. Of course, this is the time when usually the phone will ring or Karen will come home and you go to get a cup of coffee and you forget you have rubber gloves on and glue your hand to the coffee and anyway. Yeah, even President Nixon's call didn't delay our, now you can see relatively nice. Any little wrinkles, here's a little air bubble up here. If I was going to go crazy, just you could press these down. But once this dries, any spot that's in fact I see a hair right here, it won't really matter because we're going to put Bondo on top of it. And the other part is that Brodak primer, it just seals it up beautifully. So we'll just put this by the heating vent and let it dry overnight now. Yeah, we got just a few Christmas cards from all. Oh, look at this one. I didn't even see that one.
Just telling me to get rid of that picture. But like you, I think this was a wonderful age.
All right, wait a minute. This. People all around the world want to know, what did Dennis's wife buy him for Christmas? Okay, are we going to sing Merry Christmas here or what? Open it, bozo.
What do we think this is?
Isn't that...
Take a guess what this might be. Now, Santa had his elves working on his package late last night. All these little elves were here.
I don't know. I think this tape is a 1/4 inch off on
Oh, what are we going to appearance point the package? Come on, open it. The whole world is the Khrushchev's dying to see what's in here.
All right. Shall we take a guess?
Hey, by the way, I fried my mold. I got to make a new mold for the button block. Oh, but come on, don't whimper and whine. Open it up.
Oh, so you're good. When I open a gift,
Oh.
I'm like this.
The whole Buzz Brodak wants to know. Buzz Brodak wants to know, what did Dennis get for Christmas? Oh, it came in a box. How unusual, a postal box. Paul Winter wants to know.
Get your knife.
Elliot Scott wants to know. Did they make a fuss about him like in Florida when he's down there?
No.
Oh man, nobody cares. Wayne doesn't care.
We don't even make a fuss over it.
Now, wait a minute. Dennis's airplane room is not like Wendy's Spitfire bedroom?
Exactly. It's not.
Oh, is it more like a pig pen?
Yes.
Dennis, how embarrassing. Your room is a pig pen.
No, I wanted to show everybody at the nest.
Did she show you the Spitfire bedroom?
Yes, I think we're
Oh.
nice indeed and beautiful.
We did that so Buzz Brodak could get up in the morning and count the Spitfires on the ceiling. All right. Dennis, what do you think Santa brought you? Take a wild guess. Come on, Dennis.
dope.
Oh! He's a drug addict. He gets dope for Christmas. What could Santa possibly have bought him? Look at this. Gallons of Brodak dope.
I guess I better film something.
Wow. You better win the concourse award. Holy crap.
Gee, thank you.
Wow. Claire, look, is he worth
This
it?
is fantastic.
And look, let me show you something, Dennis. You know what this is? Check this out, silver. This is for sanding floors. I put an extra can in there because you're extra flawed.
Yeah, I know. I need extra flaws.
Oh, man. Now look, if he doesn't clean up his Spitfire, make him like a Dennis Toth bedroom.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Boy, they're really letting him have it. Oh, man.
It'll have
I bet you're glad you stopped by.
You don't realize.
By tomorrow morning, 90 people around the world will know what Dennis got for Christmas. He'll be getting emails and everything. And that he's a slob. He's gotten worse. Oh, jeez. Oh,
We're having
man.
too much fun with this. Is what the problem is.
You want to buy a copy of this tape? I'll sell you the master copy. Now, before I start a day's work, I know I'm going to have to make some of these molds over, so there's this is a good time while I'm working, and this is one of my theories for getting a lot done. And believe me, when you're in your own business, if you don't get a lot done, I know anybody's ever been in business knows, one thing always has to be drying. So I want to do a little touch up on this mold where I have a couple imperfections with the green putty. And then when I go to lay up the other mold, see, this will already be prepared. I can do all 3 molds if I want to at the same time. Wipe everything off with M600 because you know you have all that parting wax and everything. I don't want that to interfere with the final mold. Now that green putty is really excellent. This is the 3M product. You can tell how much. We've done about 10 planes with this already. It's 05960, and we're going to touch up all the little spots in there. Then that can dry while we're sanding out the fuselage itself. This is good to have in your shop, even for touching up in a final paint job. This is excellent material. Dries quickly, sands easily, makes for a good repair, but it has no strength. You can't make a fillet, you can't hold motor mounts in with it. No strength at all. It's just a cosmetic repair. I put some thin CA on here and try to get the structure that it doesn't have a crack that goes right through. Then I can take a little bit of this. Just remember, the only downside of this material, no strength. This does all the cosmetic work. But if you made a fillet or something out of this, you definitely would lose the wing of the plane. Now I'm going to look along here. If you look up here, there's another spot. Hard to focus on this and do the work at the same time. Now this can dry, and of course it's best if it dries overnight even. And it sands beautifully as long as you sand it wet. Always put it on in paper thin layers. You can see right in there, there's another crack. This mold has really taken a beating when we were chiseling the part off. I guess we need more wax, more release agent on it, I'm not sure. Let the thin CA go on there. Squeeze it. When it dries, I'll put the putty on. It's a good idea because this material dries so quickly. Is get rid of all the old material off the spatula, trowel. Get rid of the material that's already out of the tube. Get some fresh material. It only takes about a minute and this is already starting to harden up. But once this dries up, you can feather this in, of course. Save yourself a little sanding time. Well, I try to get all the spots that I thought might need a touch-up as long as we're going to make some new molds here or have the option of making new molds. This is the hardest edge to get just right, is where it comes, if it comes down and then there's a little niche, boy, it just tears the piece apart, the part all up when you go to take it off. I had a little niche in there I wanted to correct. So our second set of molds, and I guess, well, again, there's good news and bad news, you know. There's always good news and bad news. Anyway, we'll put this aside to dry overnight, come back to it tomorrow, get that fuselage out and try to get that sanded out today. Anytime you're done with a fiberglass, make sure when you're done with the fiberglass job that the fiberglass is hard. If it's still gummy and sticky, usually 24 hours is the time you need. Then I'll get a brand new blade, trim this even, and this is one of the things I want to do right away, because this piece that I'm going to cut off, I can take a little look at it and I can tell if the epoxy is truly hardened. Oh yeah, that's hard as a rock. So the first step will be I'm going to take this and carve all this away, get rid of all of this. I can leave it right on this pad for the time being. I've got a blob. Every time you run into a blob, of course. There we go. I want to trim it right even with the bottom. And that was pretty cool with Dennis last night. He didn't know he's getting... You know how many of my friends have gotten Brodak dope for Christmas? He's just one of many. And by the way, if you'd like that same thing, any of the women in the audience, next year we can provide your husband with Brodak Dope gift wrap. All you have to do is gift wrap it yourself, no problem. Anyway, we always rank on Dennis, but I'll tell you, he's added a nice piece to our development program, and he probably knows more about molding than I do. I know he knows more about making props. I always try to get that off so I have a nice edge to work off. Because remember, this is an edge we're going to need to reference off eventually. The idea too is always to put a little tension. I'm putting tension on this so I get a nice clean cut right on the edge. No matter what part you're fiberglassing, doesn't matter if it's a plug or a mold or what. She's ready to be sanded. Handy. This, I don't know what you even call it. It's made by 3M and it has a little like a pad, because we're doing basically all curved surfaces. And this holds the sticky back paper to your hand to a certain degree. Now usually the first test is, as soon as you start sanding, you want to see dust. If you see dust, you know the epoxy's cured. If you see chewing gum on the paper, let it sit up by a heating vent again. Now, the idea is I don't want to sand down through the fiberglass. I don't want to have any, if I can possibly help it. I just want to sand enough that I can find the high and low spots here. I know I have a little spot in here where I kind of sanded this too thin. So this will give me a little room here that I can put some filler on there. And you can pretty much get an idea. That's just coming right off. I put a lot of time into getting this part of it sanded out smooth. Now the reason is because I have this spot in here that I sanded the wood too thin is what happened. In an attempt to get a draft angle on this, I really did make a little error there. So I'm going to take this now, clean it all off with M600, and take right in here and try to build up maybe a 1/64 of an inch of Bondo or some filler material. I'll see if I have any fresh cans of Bondo over there. I have some feather fill. Just so I can get that contour back. Now, yeah, keep in mind, I'm trying to get a draft angle out this way. Just even a 1/64 of an inch is enough sometimes. It makes the part easy to release. And it's sanded out beautifully, by the way. Always when you're done with this kind of an operation, because the sandpaper does have contaminants in it, before I put any other material in here, I want to wipe it all down with M600 for sure. By the way, a little mount stand worked out well. One of the biggest pain in the necks is when you're trying to do something is well, how do you hold it? Who's going to hold it? Should make Dennis come over here and hold it all day for you. This is a marine version of Bondo. It's ordinary Bondo to buy in a auto supply store or whatever. Very inexpensive. Good for this kind of a fill-in job. You would certainly not want to use this on a real model, but on a plug, because it's heavy. This can weighs, it's plenty heavy. But if you were doing this kind of a little spot repair or repairing fiberglass wheel pants or something, this is a perfect material. Use the can well, you'll notice some of the chemicals seem to float to the top. Always a good idea to stir the can first, especially if you don't use it on a regular basis. You don't want those chemicals on top of the can. And it's always a good idea to be careful you don't put too much hardener. Not enough, it'll just take longer to... Polyester resin will take a little bit longer to set up, and we don't care. We don't care if it takes it's supposed to dry in 5 minutes. We don't care. We'd let it dry in an hour. But if you put too much hardener in, what happens? It turns to chewing gum. Then you know you've put too much hardener in. A good mix is always get it right off the bottom. That's where it would tend to have no hardener if you didn't do that. You want to get a clean spatula, and you really have about a 5-minute working time to get this in position. This stuff stinks to holy hell too. Karen goes wild. If she was home right now, she'd be thinking, yeah, that stuff stinks. Ah! Again, one of the things I thought of a way of getting around this the next time we make a mold like this, of course it's too late now to do it on this one, is to put a little draft angle into all the formers, put a like a 1 degree angle, then I wouldn't be tempted to sand this so thin. Now, with any kind of polyester resin, Bondo, whatever, you don't want to make big thick coats. You want them to be paper thin. And once you sand one, you can go back over this because it's going to dry in 5 minutes, especially if the shop conditions are warm. Now see those little things, those are little hardened spots of junk that are in the polyester. It's picking up. I'll leave it a little bit oversized because stuff sands relatively easily once it hardens up. Roughly about 5 minutes, and you can see this has turned to cheese. Cheese means you can't spread it anymore. It's in the beginning of its hardening stage. Now you basically just, it's a good idea as soon as that happens to clean the tools off, clean your hands off, and give it some time. You know, in our case, we have other projects to work on, and this is a material you can use from time to time, but you can't. I've made fillets with it, yeah, and I've done other things around cowlings and repairs, but you don't want to get in the habit of just troweling this on because it is relatively heavy. When it goes to cheese, you still have a little time window. You can clean your tools with isopropyl alcohol is the best that I've found, although acetone and lacquer thinners will probably do it too, but the isopropyl is the most reasonable, and you'd like to get, well, in my case I don't really care, but most people are real aware of having things on their hand that at the end of the day they can't get off. There's just no way I can do this work and stay perfectly clean. It just doesn't work. The can says 20 minutes before sanding, the hardening time. That's true if you have shop conditions that are 70, 75 degrees. It's usually very variable in the shop, according to how many fans I have going and doors open and stuff. Relatively cold today, we'll give that at least an hour and work on some other projects while we're waiting for that to dry.
You see the Bondo powdering off? This is why we glassed it first. You could never do this over raw wood because you'd hit the soft wood. Allows us to really lay down and get these ground in nice. What we're looking for here, what's significant, you can see the powder coming off. I don't know if you can see that.
What we're looking for is that it feather edges out real nice, and that it's powder. Once it's powder and it's feather edging, now you can work with this and do the shaping. Obviously, it goes without saying, if you're doing this off camera, wear a mask. I don't think I do this without a mask. Anyway, it looks like we're ready for, well, I think we could prime this now and do the rest with the green putty. You know, one little bad spot up here. Now, by the way, if you happen to sand through the glass cloth, which it's almost inevitable that you will, a little CA. A lot of times you don't get it in one coat. In this case, it looks like we still have a little valley there. The old thing, don't use kicker. And if it shows up in a final mold, we'll put some of that green putty on top of it. So this is basically ready. Once that's out, this is ready for the primer coat. What I decided to do, because that low spot was still there, I just put another coat of Bondo on there. Now let that kick. Repeat the same thing, no point putting it on video. It's always better to do it in thin layers. If you glob it right on, oh, much better to do it in thin layers. That Bondo to dry up. I got all these toners from Bob Brookins. These are the things we're going to be trying to help formulate, or maybe even come up with a formula between Bob Brookins and myself. He actually gets the credit for doing all the legwork on this. I got all kind of reds and greens, and boy, these are beautiful colors. And of course, the Miss Ashley red. This is the one. No, where the hell? Yeah, I'm already low. This is the Miss Ashley red, which we're hoping we're going to be able to come up with our own colors. And boy, that is one bright. I held that by the picture. That is really nice. So anyway, thanks to Bob Brookins for doing all this legwork. What I did though, I took one of these and I want to do a little test, as we always do. The first thing, whenever you're mixing toner and actually these toners are made for acrylic lacquers and lacquers, but they do work in butyrate dope. What I have noticed though is as time goes by, say 3 or 4 years later, they kind of gel at the bottom and you need to shake them up and mix them. But in the meantime, I mixed up a batch of 50-50, Brodac dope, Brodac thinner, and some of the red toner that Bob sent. I'm going to do, I got just an old prop I want to try, and then I'll mail it to John to see if he, if he likes it, if he hates it, he'll live without it, whatever. It's a decent day for, actually it's a decent day. If that Bondo would dry up, I could get the mold sprayed today too. Did what Bob Brookins thought would be a good thing to do is try putting a little bit of toner in the silver as a base coat. So I'm going to mix up some of this, what I'll call a base coat right now. Bob, of course, is the consummate expert on all these high-tech finishes, but we're trying to come up with something that, the problem with candy apple is if you don't apply it right, you get zebra stripes, well, and usually you need a lot of it. Well, we're going to find out by the end of the afternoon because we've got plenty of, and it's a decent day to test too. So I'm going to take some relatively thick silver, paint a prop with this, with some candy apple mixed in it to see what it looks like over a base coat. You can see the color on this. It's a relatively bright purple. From the toners, there's no clear on it yet, so obviously. But what I did, I made up some little test jars for John. And I'll send him the test, and I'll send him the paint already mixed so that he can do a test on his own. The purple looks great. The red looks like it takes a lot more to cover than I'm used to. Feedback on this after doing a few tests. I've got a couple of these propellers done already. The red seemed to need way too much pigment. We need to come up with a better formula for that. I'm going to get that out of the program right now. The blue is perfect. The blue you could just mix in Brodac dope and go. The purple looks beautiful. The purple looks even better than the blue. So this is how this stuff almost always gets developed. You got to come up with the formula now. Now the thing is, I got to get John's approval and Bob Brookins to take a look at this. It looks like right now that you could just go right ahead. Purple and blue are in the bank. But again, these reds, the reds seem to be weak. I'm not sure why. Maybe there was some thinner in here. This one that's marked very candy red special is very weak. It needed 3 coats to cover. Anyway, I'll let John take a look at the purple and blue. Even if you just went with the purple and blue, wow. I don't know if you can see this in real life. It really is a nice color, though. This color is my personal favorite. I don't know if you can really get a feel for how nice. It's like an ink color. It's almost like the tweener color. Anyway, the next step, of course, John has to make a decision. And Bob Brookins has to let me know about the red. Maybe that's a characteristic of these candy reds that they don't cover real well. I'm sure some of that is true in the world of custom automotive finishes. They know certain, and red is usually the color. Now maybe I didn't put enough pigment in. Again, I was trying to come up with a fair sampling here, but it'll be up to John to decide. I think this is going to work real well. I think this is going to be the beginning of our candy apple program right here. Keep in mind, these are just some of the colors that may or may not be coming right from Brodak. One way or another, we don't know. But right now, this was the first day of actually testing paint samples. And the props that I tried, I can't put these in the mail today. I wanted to put them in the mail to John. I went over white, I went over silver. Did another one with all the purple colors and the blue colors. These look like, now once this dries overnight, I'll put a coat of clear on it just to see what that looks like. And then I'll ship these off to John also. And send him off to paint samples. Well, I'll tell you, nothing would be neater in my book than having some of these colors are really fantastic. You can picture on, I mean, nobody has ever had candy apple butyrate dope colors. We're right on the leading edge of having this, boy, and I hope this really works out. And special thanks to Bob Brookins for all his help, time on the phone, legwork, mixing samples, whatever, shoplifting samples. Now, as long as it's a paintable day out there, I want to get my little touch-up on the mold done. These little rubber polywogs are an excellent little choice. You're getting in the angles and corners. M600. And the last thing of the day, I hope I can beat the clock a little bit here and get a coat of primer on the fuselage. And then I'll consider this a good day. Anyway, as long as we never lose this plug, we can always make the mold over. It certainly would be a lot easier to run the mold over than to make the plug over. And even though you feel, you feel stupid when you ruin a mold, well, you know what? That's the way you learn. Well, it was the best of all possible world days. The weather cooperated. We got another coat of Brodak primer on our mold. So this is now rebuilt. Actually, as soon as I get some more material, I can lay up a replacement for the one that the one that I screwed up. Anyway, the fuse is up here, sitting here drying in primer. We'll let it dry overnight. It's sitting up here nice. What I can't wait for is, we're going to get down here tomorrow, or the next day, I don't know when we're going to work on this again. Get these parts sanded out again. It looks like we're having a little bit of painting weather lately anyway. Do some more testing on the can. Now, do you want to tell us the story of this reindeer?
I ran out of gold beads.
We call him Diaper Deer.
Yes, no.
He's mooning us.
Beads on his butt.
No beads on his butt. Karen's making this.
This is a centerpiece for our dining
I work
table.
my fingers to the bone so that this woman can be Martha Stewart in disguise.
It's fun though.
Diaper Deer. So you glued each bead on with John Brodak CA, huh?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Works like a charm. Doesn't smell so great though.
Diaper Deer. He looks cute. My work table when I'm not at home, when I'm out working. Look, Miss Ashley becomes Miss Diaper Deer. What did you do to? Oh, he's Rudolph. I see what you did. You made him into Rudolph.
I did.
Now Paul Winter would be so jealous. Oh, we got two Diaper Deers?
Not a diaper.
Look what happened to this one. Oh, it's Candy Dish Deer. Don't mind if I do. They're gonna look great. Christmas is coming. Now I gotta tell you, I wake up early in the morning, have my coffee. I'm in the middle of having my coffee. FedEx comes to the table. This is a surprise Christmas present for me. Actually, you know what? It's not for me. It's for everybody that subscribes to the tapes. From Paul Winter. Now, Paul, you've redeemed yourself. I used to think you were the cheapest guy on the planet. Now you're number 2. Anyway, obviously there's going to be some great action on these videos. But I wanted to make a mention of this, and this is this phone number for the Skyfire videos. These people, I've bought many, many videos from them. They have train videos. They have airline videos, Reno area. There's just a bunch of stuff they have. Their 800 number is 800-852-2330. And I would suggest anybody that really wants to get somebody else a great Christmas present. Now, we're trying to build a library of these. We've got 89, 91, 92, and now we have 98 and 99. We're going to try to fill in the gaps. And anybody out there that would like to borrow these or get me to make them a copy, obviously they can borrow it. These are not our tapes to sell, but we certainly are welcome to loan them to people, and hope that it'll generate some business when I loan this to you, that you'll be interested in purchasing one of these from Skyfire. These are great, by the way. These are really world-class things. This morning what I did, where this was dried up, I took some of the green putty, went over all the little defects, fingernail marks, and whatever that are in there. This is now going to dry for a couple hours, and because actually today is Christmas Eve, I don't think we're even going to get to work on this much. We're doing some other little kind of little charity work in the neighborhood, and we will get back to this maybe after Christmas. I'm not sure. Speaking of presents, I mean, if anybody hasn't seen this tape, this is, I don't know how to even describe it. This is my own version of Skyfire. Karen got me an aerobatic ride in an AT6, and of course it's on video from 3 different cameras, so this is my first takeoff in an AT6 here. Anyway, I love to loan this stuff out. I'm sure the people at Skyfire enjoy making their tapes, and I'm sure I've generated some sales for them over the years, but keep in mind these are not things, they're not made cheaply, and you really shouldn't make bootleg copies of them. But once you have a copy, of course, it's okay to loan it to all your friends in the hope that they'll go and buy a tape. And Paul, thank you very much from me and Karen and everybody. Well, here he is. And I mean, Paul, I got to tell you, if we could only make you understand that when you go to a restaurant and a young lady waits on you and pats your head and serves you food, she's looking for a tip. She doesn't want to marry you. Anyway, thanks a lot, Paul. We appreciate it, and we're going to be sharing this with all our subscribers. One of the things I wanted to show is when you get your coat of primer on there, what you generally want to do is hold it up to the light like this, candle it, and by doing this you find defects. You don't really see them until you paint it. Now the white doesn't show as much as the silver, but in this case you can see right there. You can see there's a defect. Little things that you just don't sand out, and now because we have fiberglass on this and Bondo, it'll take a little bit of a beating, but once this is all dried up, actually it's dry right now, we'll get some 600 paper, some 400 paper, whatever, and wet sand it all out and get another coat of primer on that. That'll be the next step on that. Now every year around Christmas or around New Year's, I try to evaluate the year that just went by and the year coming up. And I look around the shop and I think this time last year we were finishing up the I-beam Spitfire and other projects we were working on and how far we've come in that year. And it's hard to estimate, but we're really trying to make some progress here, and I hope that people that are sharing the videos and watching them understand none of this stuff is cheap, none of it is easy in terms of time or energy. And this plane, more than anything, I have just put my heart and soul into trying to develop this, and I hope, well, I keep hoping more with each passing day that it's going to be, in some way, add a nice little dimension to the world of stunt. I just wanted to show this before we use these. I got a little bit of time here before we got to take care of the Christmas dinner. Anyway, what I wanted to show, and because a lot of people, especially if my friends overseas, constantly ask me about these things. Well, one of the ways you can get a whole selection of these is you go buy a Porter Cable, one of these guys. I don't even know what they call it, a profile sander, and it comes with attachments for about 10,000 of these things. And they basically have all different shapes like this, and these are so handy. Now, when you get to the point of fine detailing sanding, you really can't, here's the problem, you really can't fine detail sand with your bare hand. You tend to create that. You got to use as many blocks and shapes. Like for a leading edge, this is appropriate. You can see I've already been using this one for a leading edge. Basically for an investment of about, I don't know, $10 or something. This one is especially good on the molds for doing edges and corners. And the flat plate, when you're doing something that's just a little bit curved, you can make good use of this. Notice one side has little feet, so it kind of grabs a little better. These are little beauty supply place things, and they're washable for doing this kind of wet sanding. dowels. And what I tend to do is I have this little box right by my workbench, and I keep them all together. So when I'm going to do a fine detail sanding, these are called tadpoles, by the way. Woodworkers supply houses have them, and let me get a piece of sandpaper here. So handy when you're doing wet sanding. You can get in corners and angles. You can't get your fingers in corners and angles. It's impossible. So these are, for an investment possibly of maybe $15, you can have one of every shape, every size. Even if you don't buy the sander, you can buy the accessory kit. Keep them all in a bag or a box or something. Because what happens with these, everybody that used to come to my shop, they'd say, oh, can I borrow that one? I never saw it again. Finally, I just went out and bought a whole nother set. This is an especially good one. It's got a real accurate angle here for getting in nice corners and edges and angles. Anyway, it looks like I'll have just enough time, maybe even I got about a half an hour. I want to sand the plug out, and hopefully, it's really cold outside, but maybe even get the next coat of primer on. Each coat of primer, you should have less and less flaws in it until you're real happy with it. And obviously, in my case, I'd like to make this as perfect as possible in case we use this in the future to make parts that we're going to sell. Now, the system I've used over the last, I don't know, 10 years, I guess, is I've tried various degreasing agents to use as a sanding medium. Now, the reason I don't like to use water, soapy water, Windex, or alcohol-based products like windshield washer fluid is if you tend to sand through in some spot, the wood swells up, puckers up, and then you have to reseal it. Typically, this product evaporates so quickly, and that's the reason I like it. It's called Sikkens M600. I'm not sure where the local distributor is because every time I go to give this number out, somebody tells me they can't